Annabeth Chase is a character from PJO, Heroes of Olympus, Trials of Apollo, and Magnus Chase in the Gods of Asgard. Today, I'll share and break down her life from the Heroes of Olympus to Magnus Chase and to little bits and info we got from the Trials of Apollo. So as usual, spoiler warning for the series I just mentioned earlier, and now let's get started. If you want Annabeth's life in the first 5 books of the PJO series, it's linked down below. Before we head to what happened to Annabeth in the first book in the Heroes of Olympus series, or The Lost Hero, you need to get a bit of context as to what took place in between The Last Olympian and The Lost Hero. In The Last Olympian, Percy and Annabeth finally got together as a couple, and they had started dating for a couple of months. However, things go bad when Hera, or the goddess of marriage, wanted to recruit demigods who could be the demigods of the Prophecy of Seven. Realizing that Percy was one of the demigods of the prophecy, Hera kidnapped Percy in the middle of the night and erased his memory. She then placed him in Camp Jupiter and kidnapped Jason Grace next. She placed him in the wilderness school with Piper and Leo to meet with the Greek demigods, and Percy would be with the Romans. Nobody was aware of Hera's plan, however, and Annabeth was devastated by losing Percy. She searched and looked for him, but she couldn't find him. So now, let's head to the events of The Lost Hero. Here, we meet Annabeth and a son of Iris named Butch reach the Grand Canyon, where Jason, Piper, and Leo were at. Percy was missing for 3 days by then, and Annabeth came to recruit the 3 demigods in the Apollo chariot to Camp Half-Blood. Annabeth only agreed to go there because Hera was giving her visions of a guy with a lost shoe that was said to show her where Percy was. When she arrived there, she realized that Jason was the guy with the lost shoe, and she demands him where Percy was. Jason doesn't have any memories because of Hera tampering with his brain, and he doesn't know how to reply to her. Annabeth gets frustrated at this, but in the end, she brought them all to Camp Half-Blood. Once there, Annabeth gives Piper a tour and helps her pick out catoptries, which was a knife used by Helen of Troy. Piper breaks down about her relationship with Jason, about the fake memories that she had with him, which were actually brought by the mist, and how much Piper loved him. Piper notes to herself that even if Annabeth was able to hide and control her emotions, she knew that Annabeth was hurting inside because of losing Percy. When Jason, Piper, and Leo are given the quest to save Hera, Annabeth doesn't join the quest and instead uses her time to search for Percy. Before going to the quest, Jason met Annabeth and she told him about Thalia, and how Thalia and Jason shared the same last name, which was Grace. Annabeth questions Jason about this, and Jason says that he remembers Thalia despite Hera's spell. Annabeth is shocked by this, as she didn't really know that Thalia had a younger brother. After Jason, Piper, and Leo's quest, Annabeth gathers and figures out that Percy was in the Roman camp, and how Hera planned the whole thing. Because of this, she agrees to find Percy with Jason, Piper, and Leo. So, that's what happened to Annabeth in The Lost Hero. Annabeth doesn't technically appear in the Son of Neptune, but there are a few mentions of her, and they were all from Percy. He remembers her despite Hera tampering with his memories. He remembered her as he fought the Gorgons, he sees her in a dream, and Hera even mentions her when she appears to him. She told him that Annabeth had a hard quest ahead of her, and that she may not be up to do it. So, yeah, that's all we got from Annabeth in this book, so let's head to the events of the Mark of Athena. In the last part of The Lost Hero, it's revealed that Leo Valdez was going to make a ship called the Argo II, and we meet Annabeth and the Mark of Athena aboard that ship. She pretty much becomes the leader of the entire team, and she brought Jason, Piper, Leo, and Coach Hedge. She checks if everything is in shape when it comes to meeting with the Romans, because she wanted a peaceful meeting with them to get Percy back. She thinks to herself that she wanted to talk to her mother Athena, which was something impossible to do because of an argument the two of them had. It turns out that Athena told Annabeth to follow something, which was called the Mark of Athena, and she gave her a coin with an owl symbol on it, which was the Mark of Athena. It was a quest that a lot of children of Athena attempted to do, but nobody has ever came back alive. Annabeth is almost knocked off her feet because of an explosion Terminus made, but it's settled after Jason requests permission to cross Camp Jupiter. After that, Annabeth spots Percy with Frank and Hazel. She notes that Percy was in a praetor robe, and the crew goes down from the Argo II. There, she meets Reyna, who at that time was the female praetor of Camp Jupiter. Reyna calls Jason her colleague, but Annabeth, who knew how to read people because of her training and intellect, knew that Reyna had romantic feelings for Jason with just a glance. Annabeth also compares herself to Reyna, thinking to herself that she was a lot like her. How Reyna managed the team, had to stay strong for everyone, had to fight and not show her vulnerable side. In Rick's words, Reyna was forcing a look of courage while holding back a mixture of hopefulness and worry and fear that she couldn't show in public. Annabeth knew that expression. She saw it every time she looked in a mirror. Annabeth runs towards Percy, and the two of them kiss. After which, though, Annabeth feels bitter about all the things she went through just to get him back, and this makes her judo flip him over her shoulder. She pinned him to the floor and said, "If you ever leave me again, I swear to all of the gods." Percy laughed at that, and the two of them got up. Reyna jokingly said that Annabeth might have been a Roman or an Amazon warrior, but Annabeth assured her that she doesn't usually do that. The group relates each other's journey, with Jason, Piper, and Leo's quest from the Lost Hero, to Percy, Hazel, and Frank's quest from the Son of Neptune. Percy mentions the fact that his memories had been tampered with like Jason's, and that the only thing he remembered was Annabeth. Annabeth was greatly touched by this, to the fact that she had to control the urge not to cry. At one point, Annabeth was alone with Reyna, and she finally recognized her as one of Cersei's assistants who did the makeover she had when she and Percy were there. Annabeth apologizes to Reyna about exploding the island, and Reyna instead talks about how Jason changed. Annabeth feels bad and guilty, because she also noticed that Reyna liked Percy as well, and it seemed as though Annabeth took everything from Reyna. They continue to talk about a son of Athena Reyna met on Cersei's island, and how he was searching for the Mark of Athena too. They stop talking abruptly when an explosion fires at camp, and it turns out that Leo was possessed by an Eidolon, and the creature made him fire at Camp Jupiter. Through the chaos, the Romans started throwing stuff at the ship, and the Greeks and the Seven go aboard the ship. Percy tackles Leo to the floor and demands what the hell just happened. Leo doesn't remember what happened, and because he was dazed, Annabeth took control of the ship. Throughout the book, Annabeth helps Leo fix the ship, and one night, she sneaks Percy out in the middle of the night to bond. The two of them kissed and ended up falling asleep in each other's arms. At one point, Annabeth meets with Frank, who was stuck on a Chinese finger trap, and Annabeth helped him remove it. Little did Annabeth know that the finger trap was going to help her in her quest in the Mark of Athena. Soon enough, Annabeth realizes that the quest was about retrieving the Athena partners that the Romans took, and that Annabeth was going to face her worst fear. When Octavian found them and was about to capture them back to Camp Jupiter as prisoners, Annabeth threw her dagger into the ocean to summon Percy. A huge wave threw Octavian and the Romans off the bridge, and Percy came up, holding her dagger and completely poker-faced. The attack continues though, and it led up to Annabeth being shut in a room. The room is then swarmed by black spiders. The spiders go away, however, because of a red owl symbol, which was the symbol of Athena. There, Reyna confronts Annabeth and demands that they should surrender. In their conversation, Reyna ends up letting Annabeth go. However, Reyna warns that in the next time they meet, they would be enemies in a battlefield. Annabeth agrees, and the two of them part. After the encounter the group had with Chrysaor, Annabeth decides to go to the quest to find the Mark of Athena. There, Annabeth is brought to the quest by a couple who always brings children of Athena to follow the mark. Annabeth is dropped off by the couple, and she begins her journey. First, she met a gang of ghosts and killed them all by cutting down a weak support beam. From it though, Annabeth crashed and broke her ankle. She places ambrosia with it to heal, and kept going. She eventually came across Arachne, and was trapped in a web. Despite the fact that Annabeth feared Arachne like all children of Athena did, Annabeth formed a plan in her mind as to how to get out of there. She thinks to herself as to what would lead to Arachne's downfall, and this made her realize Arachne's fatal flaw, hubris, which was the same fatal flaw Annabeth had. Because of this, she compliments Arachne on the tapestries Arachne made, and Annabeth bluffs that it would be perfect for Olympus. Annabeth goes on about it, and tells her to make a specific design, which, unknown to Arachne, was Frank's Chinese finger trap from earlier. Arachne made it perfectly, and Annabeth put the cherry on top by saying there was a flaw in the middle of the design, and when Arachne checked it herself, Arachne was trapped. She thrashes in her trap, and this caused the unsteady flooring of the place to crack and shake. Just then, the Argo II came flying in, and the Seven try hauling the Athena Parthenos inside. Annabeth tries to go up to the ship as well, but she is pulled down by a rope. Percy grabs her hand, and Annabeth tells him to let go. Percy disagrees and tells her, "We're staying together. You're not getting away from me. Never again." With that, Annabeth witnessed Percy ordering Nico to bring the rest of the Seven to the House of Hades in order to close the doors of death. And when Nico reluctantly agrees, Percy let go of the ledge, and they both fell into Tartarus. Now, let's head to the events of the House of Hades, the next book. Here, Annabeth and Percy trudge through Tartarus and ends up getting help by Bob the Titan. When they came across creatures called Arai, Annabeth was cursed with blindness after Polyphemus cursed her with it, when Annabeth used her invisibility cap to pretend to be nobody. After which, Annabeth got the curse of despair, which came from Calypso, as Calypso felt betrayed and hurt that Percy didn't come back for her in Ogygia, despite the fact that Percy promised that he would get her out of that island. After which, Bob saved them and brought them to Damison, a giant, and Annabeth and Percy were cured from the curses. The three of them continued the journey, and they came across Achilles. Achilles ended up betraying them, and this leads to Percy controlling the poison and choking her with it. Annabeth gets absolutely terrified of what Percy was doing, and she begs him to stop. But anyway, they eventually reach the doors of death, and Annabeth witnessed Bob and Damison's sacrifice to hold the elevator for them. Annabeth is devastated by this, and is exhausted after their journey. They meet the rest of the Seven in the heat of battle, and they all travel to Athens after it. Annabeth and Percy look up at the stars and says, "Bob says hello," which is something Bob asked them to do before he sacrificed himself. So now, let's head to the Blood of Olympus. Here, Annabeth forms a plan in order to get information from a gathering of evil spirits. When Jason's mother Beryl Grace comes over to him, Annabeth was the one who snapped Jason out of it, as she knew it wasn't the real Beryl Grace, but a memory. After which, a fight breaks out, and Annabeth took down a lot of attacking suitors. At one point in the fight, she got a cut on her neck, but overall, she was fine. She sees Jason get stabbed by Michael Varus, and immediately gives him ambrosia to heal him. Annabeth then explained her experience with Stellan, Luke's mother, and how she went insane because of the Oracle. When they reached Athens, Annabeth, Percy, and Piper came in first, and came across a shrine where the Athena and Poseidon rivalry started. Percy pulled Annabeth in a kiss and said, "The rivalry ends here. I love you, wise girl." Annabeth sighed heavily, and they all continued the quest. Eventually, Reyna was able to place the Athena Parthenos in Camp Haplod, and this made the gods' identity crisis stop. This made Athena come fight side by side with Annabeth, and in the fight, Annabeth got a cut on her leg. Added with the fact that Percy had a nosebleed, a male and a female demigod spilled blood on the Acropolis, making Gaia wake up. After the battle, Annabeth along with the rest of the Seven discussed about Leo's sacrifice to defeat Gaia. Along with the rest, Annabeth was hurt and angry that Leo kept such a secret from them, but in the end, all of them mourned Leo's so-called death. After this, Annabeth and Percy were offered to join college in New Rome by Frank and Reyna, and the two of them accepted. And now, let's head to the events of The Sword of Summer, the first book in Magnus Chase. Here, Annabeth was informed by her uncle Randolph that her cousin Magnus was missing ever since Magnus's mother's death for 2 years. Annabeth is furious by this, because she was informed very late by her uncle. What they didn't know was that Magnus witnessed their conversation, and that he chose not to show himself. We meet Annabeth again when she attends Magnus's funeral, and surprisingly finds Magnus himself alive. Annabeth hugs him hurriedly in shock and demanded what happened. Magnus tries to explain how he died, and was resurrected in Hotel Valhalla, and how it's all connected to his mother's death and his father's identity. Annabeth soon realizes that Magnus is a demigod, and tells him that she should bring him to a safe place, which was Camp Haplod. Magnus disagrees and tells her that he has a quest to go to. Annabeth wanted to help, but decided to let Magnus go to his own quest. Annabeth gave Magnus a phone number to call, and Magnus agreed. By the end part of this book, Annabeth and Magnus meet up again to spill Magnus's mother's ashes in a park. Magnus tells her that Randolph didn't know how to break it to Annabeth's family about Magnus's situation because of the rocky history the family had. Magnus apologized for this and said that he didn't want to put her in danger. Annabeth laughed at that, saying that her life was weird, and the two of them agreed to keep in touch, just so that the next generation of the Chase family wouldn't have a bad relationship. In between this book and the Hammer of Thor, Annabeth explained the Greek gods in New York, and how she was also a demigod like Magnus. Magnus in turn explained about the Norse gods, and how their family had strange connection to the gods. Annabeth also mentioned her quest in Tartarus with Percy, and the two of them really bonded. Magnus even thinks about Annabeth throughout this book, and is pretty worried about her. The two of them meet up once more, and Annabeth explains that she wasn't able to communicate with him more because of the connection issue that was going on around the world, and how Apollo was turned human as a punishment for the events of the Heroes of Olympus. Magnus explained his side of the story, about the threats Loki was making to the world, and how he needed some help when it comes to the water. Annabeth agreed, and this made her refer him to Percy. And now, let's head to the events of the Ship of the Dead. Annabeth and Percy helped train Magnus, and Annabeth was shocked that Magnus's sword Jack could talk. Then, Percy tells Magnus that most of the time, there was no plan for what was to come, and Annabeth frowned at that, as she's a war strategist who makes plans. After this, though, Percy complimented Annabeth, saying, "All I'm saying is, the most powerful demigod of our generation is sitting right here, and it isn't me. Wise Girl can't shapeshift or breathe underwater or talk to Pegasi. She can't fly and she isn't super strong, but she's crazy smart and good at improvising. That's what makes her deadly. Doesn't matter whether she's on land, in water, in the air, or in Tartarus. Magnus, you were training with me all weekend. I think you should have been training with Annabeth instead." This made Annabeth kiss Percy on the cheek, and after talking a bit more, the two of them said goodbye to Alex and Magnus. After Magnus's quest against Loki, Magnus called Annabeth up, and he noticed that she had been crying. Annabeth brushes this off though, and she says that she's proud of him that he succeeded in the quest. What Magnus didn't know was that Annabeth was crying about Jason's death, and she had just heard the news. Magnus tells her to take care of herself, and Annabeth says the same for him, and how they'll talk more soon. We barely get any info about Annabeth in the Trials of Apollo, except for a few mentions of her. One of them was from Percy in the Hidden Oracle when Apollo entered his house. Percy tells him that Annabeth was in a family emergency, which was actually when Annabeth was searching for Magnus in the Sword of Summer. The last we ever see of Annabeth is in the Tower of Nero, where she is visited by Apollo when New Rome with Percy. At this point, Annabeth and Percy both graduated high school, and was moving to college with Grover. She retires from her role as the head of the Athena cabin, and moved to college. She tells Apollo about her sadness about Jason's death, and how she was attending New Rome's college and University of California, Berkeley. And that's Annabeth's entire life in the Riordanverse. She's by far one of my most favorite female characters because of her strength to overcome a lot of challenges in her life, and I just love her as a person. So how about you? What's your favorite Annabeth moment? Let me know in the comments down below.